and educating and answering some questions. So in addition, I do want to spend some time with a discussion that stays focused on where do we go from here and how can we all play a role in making sure that going forward, we've been somewhat successful so far in curtailing the outbreak, and we certainly want to make sure that we don't lose any ground and we continue to gain ground on it. And it'd be good to have a discussion of the role of each of us can play in doing that. Again, I'm sure we'll keep the conversation constructive and positive, with the goal of working together to continue to make progress in curtailing the outbreak and moving beyond it. So I wanted to start with Heidi Bond, our Department of Health Director. And Heidi, could you just give us all an update on where we stand with the numbers and particularly the results of the rapid testing that were conducted for the general public? I know that those results were tabulated just over the weekend.
Yep, sure. Our outbreak started almost 2 weeks ago on August 25th. At that time, we had 117 cases total in the county since the beginning of the pandemic. Since that time, we have had 690 cases reported in 2 weeks. We have a total of 807 cases currently. We're still doing some data cleanup, so you'll see our numbers change a little bit. Not the amount of cases reported, but the number of cases connected to the SUNY outbreak or community cases. So we're trying to figure out, since so many cases came in so quickly, we didn't have a lot of time to do a lot of investigating on who was who and where were they. But I think right now about 675 cases are related to SUNY Oneonta, and that would mean students and their close contacts, so possibly roommates, friends, family, boyfriends or girlfriends who they had contact with who aren't SUNY students, but we are including them in the outbreak because they are directly connected to a SUNY student. So that's where we are with the outbreak. The testing sites that the state set up, 1,965 tests were completed. 91 of those were positive for a positivity rate of 4.6%. Out of those 91 that were positive, 85 were in the 18 to 24-year-old age group, so our college population. And out of those 18 to 24-year-olds that were tested, their positivity rate was 11.5.
Okay.
Some of those tested out of the 91 that were positive did not belong to Otsego County. They were other county residents outside of Otsego County. So we still have we've only seen a very few cases in the community over the past 2 weeks. We don't still, at this point, it's early yet, but we still don't see any community transmission from this outbreak. So that's
Right.
some good news. We hope it stays that way.
That's great. Heidi, I just want to say thank you. I know that with minimal staff, you've been asked to do a tremendous job and a tremendous amount of work over the past couple of weeks. And, your ability to stay on top of it and provide us with a good analysis of the numbers. And I know while you're trying to do tracing and you're trying to supervise isolation, just thank you for all you're doing. It's been a great help to all of us.
Thank you. Yeah, I will let you know, we have close to 400 people on isolation checks that are still remain in the county as of today.
Are you getting enough help? Are you getting help from the state? Are you getting enough help to be able to handle it all?
Yeah, we're doing okay. You know, it's a struggle, but I have a new staff person starting, well, actually coming back tomorrow, so that will help. And a nurse from Schoharie County volunteered to help us out today, and this New York State Department of Health has been helping. So everyone's been excellent about helping us and get through this.
Great. Thank you. Open it up for questions for Heidi, if anybody has any. Just raise your hand if you do. Okay, looks like Diane Jorgensen.
Yeah, so Heidi, do those 400 in isolation include those that are isolating on campus?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so the very, very good news is the result of the rapid testing confirmed what we felt all along, that we caught it on time to prevent transmission from the student population to the general population. And I think that was confirmed not only by the rapid testing, but by the testing that SUNY Oneonta did on the saliva testing of the staff and faculty, which I believe there were no positive cases. Is that correct, Barbara?
Correct. I can give a full update.
Yeah. So I think we have a lot to be thankful for, that we stand in a pretty good place right now, having acted swiftly in a number of ways. You know, we appreciate the quick reaction that we had from the chancellor, from the governor, from the Department of Health, in getting the testing sites here and opening up the saliva testing to all of the students so quickly. It was really good teamwork, and it's very good to see. Now, of course, the challenge is to make sure we stay where we are and get even better. We have to keep our guard up and make sure we have things in place to make sure that we don't move to increasing the transmission amongst the student population, amongst the general population, between the two. We want to see the numbers go down and down and down.
Yep, I'll jump in and sorry. I'll jump in to say my public health plug is masks are working. So for the public, wear your masks and use the public health measures that are in place when you're out in the public, and everyone should be wearing a mask and washing their hands.
Thank you, Heidi. So with that, President Morris,
Yes, so Heidi mentioned the 675 total for related. For actual students, our dashboard was updated just this evening. We had 54 additional today, so we have a total of 651 students. Again, the 675 discrepancy is the ones related to, not necessarily students. And Heidi and I, again, thanks so much for Heidi and all the work that she's done and her office has done and helped us out. So really, truly appreciate that. Of the tests we've done on campus, we've done 3,089 pooled tests of individuals. 295 from those pooled tests are positive, so we have a 0.0955 positivity rate on the pool test. We also do pool PCR tests on campus, and those are for symptomatic students, and we've done 60 PCR tests, and 39 of those have been positive. Again, those are symptomatic, so it's 0.65 positivity rate. And that total of positives, because a lot of students go off campus either to Bassett or WellNow to get tests. Our total to date is 651. In terms of students that are in quarantine on campus, we have 43 students on campus quarantine and 151. Excuse me, this is off campus. We have 43 on campus quarantined and 139 on campus in isolation, those meaning that they are tested positive. We have 151 off-campus students in quarantine and 180 off-campus students in isolation. Our move out has gone very smoothly. And so students that had tested negative were able to move out. Obviously, in isolation and in quarantine are still on campus. And so essentially all of our students have moved out will have moved out as of this evening. We do have 191 students that applied for an exception, meaning that they have homeless or housing or safety or other types of technology concerns, work concerns. So we will have just under 200 students on campus. And then obviously that could be our isolation and quarantine students. After 14 days in quarantine, a student with approval from Department of Health can leave, as well as after 10 days of isolation and symptom-free and approval by Department of Health, a student that had tested positive can leave. And so those isolation and quarantine numbers will be changing as we move forward. And again, as Heidi and the mayor stated, no employees have tested positive at this time. We will now be shifting to weekly surveillance testing. So we'll have testing tomorrow for employees and students, and then we'll be testing every Monday thereafter. And we'll have the testing, it'll be from 9 to 2:30 in order for us to get the test results up to Syracuse so that they can begin running those and have the very quick 40-hour turnaround. As well as for our Cooperstown graduate program. I see Emma right there. So just the Cooperstown, they still have classes. They're still, they will be testing, have to provide a negative test before taking their lab or in-person classes, and then they'll be required to test on a regular basis with surveillance testing.
Thank you. I'll open up the questions, but first, let me just ask the question that I'm hearing most. As we go forward and nearly all of the students in Oneonta will be living off campus for the rest of the semester, what access will they have to the saliva test, the interval saliva testing, and what ability will you have to see that a very large percentage of them are tested?
So they will have, again, the testing on campus is for all students and employees. And so that testing is available to them, again, starting tomorrow on a weekly basis. The mandatory testing for any student that takes an in-person class or uses our facility is mandated. We will be double checking that any student that in the past was an on-campus student and that has been tested, that they verify that they've been tested. Moving forward, once they verify of testing, moving forward, unfortunately, since we will not be having any on-campus classes and our facilities are closed down, if any student has not been tested, we cannot mandate a student that is not taking in-person classes or using facilities to test, but we will be certainly having a strong campaign moving forward to have students and the availability for students to be tested, and it'll be regular.
Thank you, President Morris. I'm going to open it up to questions from for the president, if anybody has any. Dave Risberger.
Yes, thank you. You have 43 on-campus students in quarantine and 139 on campus in isolation. Who is monitoring those students?
The The students we have during the day, our kind of control team is in the isolation booth, as well as we have regular meal deliveries and moving through that. With regards to evening, we have patrols by our UPD as well as our RAs throughout the facilities.
The RAs are in the buildings?
Not in the evenings. The RAs don't, because they're students, and you can imagine that we're not going to put students in places where you have largely infected populations.
So in the evening, the monitoring is done by the university police outside, that's it?
Outside, and then we do have the RAs will be making calls, but yes, there is not a person inside the dorm. That's not during the evenings. And that's common, as far as it's not uncommon. That's how our dorms are. We have community directors that oversee dorms, and so you don't always have a community director living in a particular dorm, and those are the professional staff.
Well, I'm a little bit concerned. There was a photo that was passed around about Toby Hall over the weekend.
Yes.
And I know the staff was notified later about it, and there was not supervision to prevent what went on. And I guess I'm wondering, what reassurances can you give the community that won't?
Yeah. So that's the isolation dorm, and those all have students were tested positive. We are doing a judicial review of that through our community standards, and reviewing the video as well as the photos, and taking swift action against any disobeying our rules.
Thank you.
Gabby, did I see your hand up?
Hello. My question was, a lot of students have been asking why we didn't wait a full 14 days before shutting down the campus.
So because of the rapid spread of the virus, as you can imagine, we're already at 651 cases. There was a concern both for on-campus as well as the community that this wasn't an extraordinary event, and that a pause was not sufficient, and so that we needed to move into more drastic measures. And so the chancellor came, as well as the New York, because New York put us, based on the guidance, put us on pause. And then, but again, the sheer rapid escalation of the virus. This virus, I mean, I'm sure Heidi would chime in, is that epidemiologists are beginning to, think about and look at this virus as a unique rapid spread, certainly through the 18 to 25-year-old population, but we couldn't put the students at risk at how rapidly it was moving.
So what do we have in place on checking the students that are now at home, and what's preventing them from doing the same thing now that they're all at home?
And probably Heidi can talk to the Department of Health and the Public Health. If you look to the plan that was approved, our move out plan that was approved by both state and local DOH, it talked about the best practices of moving students off campus, ensuring continuation of quarantine, retesting if symptomatic. If a student had tested positive, there's not a recommendation to have them retest, because once you've been infected, that you can actually have kind of a positivity rate for some time after. So again, it's regular surveillance and to ensure the spread doesn't continue. So our plan was based on both the state and the local Department of Health with regards to ensuring the safety of communities, not only in Oneonta, but outside of Oneonta.
Thank you.
Peter Friedman? You're muted, Peter. Peter, you're muted.
Yeah, I've heard the term suspension used for individuals and for organizations. What does suspension entail for each? And are you finding that it's a deterrent to others?
I think I'll let my Vice President for Student Development, Dr. Frank Chambers, answer that question. I think that he's better poised to talk about student development and suspension.
Let me answer the latter part of your question, Peter, that yes, I think that it's a deterrent for other students. I think that unfortunately, it's something that we typically don't like to resort to, but we are in extraordinary times, so we have to take extraordinary measures. What a suspension means is that we are suspending that student's ability to matriculate at the university until their case has been adjudicated. If they are then held responsible for the actions that they have alleged to have committed as a violation of our code of conduct, means that they will in fact be suspended for the remainder of the semester, which will ultimately place them behind. So we do believe that it's a deterrent, but we also have to make certain that we afford students their rights to due process. So the interim suspension is a measure that we have in place that gives the students an opportunity to understand that there are consequences to their actions if in fact they are held responsible for violating our student code of conduct.
So are they refunded their tuition or room fees?
If a student is suspended and that suspension is a full suspension, they are not entitled to a refund of tuition, nor they are entitled to a refund of their room and board.
And how does the suspension work with, say, a sorority?
If a student organization is suspended from campus, they are not entitled to participate in any campus activities. They can't recruit other students. They can't host meetings on campus. They have to participate in educational development opportunities to hopefully provide resources to help them not make the offense happen again for why they were originally suspended.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for President Morris? Danny Lappin?
Can't hear you, Danny.
Danny, you're muted.
Still can't hear you, Danny. If you want to type your question, go ahead.
While he sorts that out, do you mind if I ask a question?
Emma.
Go right ahead, Emma.
My question pertains to the tip line, so it might also be a question for Mayor Herzig or Chief Brenner as well. My question is, now that there is a large, population, the population of students that were living off campus that have chosen to remain to stay, I'm wondering what the role of that tip line is as it relates to the college, since any violations that would result in a call to that tip line in terms of students would have to relate to the college in some way and potentially result in action from the college.
Chief, do you want to take that, Chief?
I'll respond first as far as what we
sure,
get.
Go ahead.
If we get a, obviously if a student is cited in any way by OPD, then it moves through our community standards and judicial processes, as well as any, videos or anything that other evidence that we may have. So again, I appreciate Chief Brenner as well as Chief Philo working very collaboratively together and sharing that information so that it can move through our judicial review very quickly.
Chief, anything you want to add to that?
Well, there isn't really much to add to it. She said it right. We take all the calls from the tip line, respond to them as necessary, and if there's a probable cause there to issue a ticket, or we will, and then we relay that information to the college, and then we let their judicial or community standards review take care of it. Also, if it happens to be something that could be of concern to the Department of Health, we relay that information as well to them. Not every call we get ends up in that. As a matter of fact, it's most of the calls to the tip line are people who are concerned but don't rise to that level. We still find the tip line to be pretty good when using that manner. Every now and then it gets a little confused as to just what information we have available on it, because we do not have test results from people's rapid screening, although we get requests. We just politely tell those inquiries that isn't what the line's for.
Emma, if I can interject as well, we have a letter prepared to send to all of our students this week indicating to them that although the residence halls are closed, the campus is still operating. We're still in session, and this is still the fall semester, and that we will hold students accountable as if we were still an in-person institution. So our student code of conduct is still applicable even though we are remote. So any activities that will take place in the city, if we're made aware of it, we will adjudicate it as we would if we were having in-person instruction. So that letter will go out this week reminding all students that we are still in full session. We are just remotely.
And so Danny asked 2 questions in the chat that I'll raise. If you look, it said, we've received communication that quarantine isolated students were leaving early before the quarantine isolation periods ended. I was wondering what additional steps will be taken to ensure those who are under quarantine isolation remain that way. And so all quarantine and isolation come under the rules of the Department of Health. And so obviously if a student leaves, wherever they're at, or breaks quarantine or isolation, they're subject to Department of Health and any state fines with regards to breaking quarantine and isolation. As far as the second question, can the college keep Otsego County Health and Education Committee apprised of any planning developments for students' return in the spring? Absolutely, we certainly can do that.
Any other questions for President Morris?
I think Roxanne had one.
I have a question. So my question is, recently there has been a petition regarding the fair compensation of COVID-19 related duties for your RA on your campus. How did this petition and its demands impact COVID-19 responses on an institutional scale?
Dr. Chambers, do you want to address the resident staff? I haven't seen, me personally has not seen anything formal. I have seen some informal letters, but nothing formal in terms of demand.
The petition has over like 2,000 signatures.
Is it on,
I didn't hear the full question. Can you repeat?
Is that on change.org?
I believe so.
Yeah, so change.org has obviously a lot of different signatures besides our community members, but I haven't seen anything formal. But Dr. Chambers, do you want to, if you want to address?
I didn't hear the question. I couldn't hear the question. So if Roxanne could repeat the question.
Okay, recently there has been a petition regarding the fair compensation of COVID-19 related duties for RAs on your campus. How did this petition and its demands impact COVID-19 responses on an institutional scale?
I'm certainly not familiar with the petition. that you're referencing, so I couldn't speak credibly to it, to be perfectly honest.
And I think, Roxanne, maybe you're asking a question. I mean, maybe I'm trying to read into your question, so let me know if I'm getting it right or not. Is that you're asking whether or not, you know, something with regards to the RAs was insufficient with regards to our ability to have a swift response? And my answer would be no, that certainly the RAs, as well as we had many, probably hundreds of volunteers of staff that came in to do all kinds of different things, whether it was meal delivery, calling students, transporting students, all of those things that were necessary given the large scale and the large numbers, is that we essentially had to mobilize a population well beyond any of the residential life staff because of the tremendous nature of this virus. And so again, I applaud my community and staff and faculty that volunteered outside of their job duties, outside of their hours and their normal hours, for doing just a tremendous amount of work over the last 2 weeks and continue to do so. So I'm very thankful for all the volunteer work.
Diane Jorgensen.
Hi, I have a question for Heidi based on something that President Morris said. It's about people off campus who are in quarantine. I understand now that there are 151 students who are quarantining off campus. My assumption is they were identified as close contacts of those known to have tested positive. So my question for Heidi is 2 parts. One, do you have the number of total people, not students, but total people who have been identified as close contacts of those students who have tested positive? And the second part of that question is, do you have a sense of how many of those total people identified as close contacts of those positive students have had testing or not?
I can't give you a number right now because the virtual contact center is doing our quarantine monitoring for us. I can get that number. And I would say a great deal of those on quarantine have been tested. I think we've had over 150 people on quarantine convert to a case. So they were on quarantine and developed illness or tested positive. So we've had that. Many have also tested negative, but they continue their 14-day quarantine. So, but I can get those numbers.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions for President Morris. Okay.
There's Kevin.
Hello. President Morris, on one hand, I want to be appreciative of the meeting that you had both with faculty, staff, as well as students the day that the college decided to close down in order to answer some questions or alleviate some concerns. However, in the hour and a half time that I was in that meeting, I was a little disappointed at the fact that a lot of the answers to any of the questions weren't really answers and were waiting on the Department of Health to coordinate alongside the administration. It seemed like most of the stuff that was talked about in that question and answer session could have been sent in an email of, we're waiting on the Department of Health for most things. So I just want to express a little bit of frustration with that. I don't really know how to improve that in the future. I guess my question for you kind of is a repeat of the question I had last meeting, which was under what parameters the college would shut down. And I believe the answer you gave me last time was that there was no current advisory or number to hit, which would cause the campus to close. And yet a little more than 48 hours later, the campus was closed. And I believe the decision was made by the chancellor. So if you could just clear up exactly who made what decision at the time or what changed within the 3 days since our last meeting to cause the campus to close, I'd be appreciative of that.
Yeah, thank you. I actually thought about you when you answered that question as we were, how quickly things change. Is that obviously the difference from when I was answering the question just a week ago, is that it was based on the direction and the guidelines given by the governor with regards to pause. And so that there was no indication of closing down completely based on those initial guidelines. But again, based on just the rapidness and the extreme spread on our campus, which is incredibly unique. I mean, you just don't really see this type of spread and so fast and so ferociously, is that in conversation with the chancellor, as well as my team, the healthcare professionals, Department of Health, just a number of experts in the field, it was the recommendation. So it was a collective recommendation that we needed to close down. And so again, my answer was true at the moment of time, but that's like how quickly this all changes. And I do apologize, for, I wanted to have the meeting with students and faculty, but obviously there was lots of questions with regards to move out, and Department of Health was really, involved in how that move out should be. And again, this is all very new to this scale. And so some of that, we thought that we had a more concrete, but, it was changing. And even as of today, some of the guidance has changed with specifically with the isolated students and having to be retested. So it's a very dynamic situation, and we are going to have changes along the way because, again, this virus is still young and we are learning, and likely it could be that we had a particular strain, and we'll wait for the epidemiologists to kind of do a case study of it. But certainly this is unique. We are in a unique situation comparatively from other institutions and other, large scale events that haven't had the viral spread that we had.
Okay. Thank you, President Morris. Appreciate you taking the time to answer questions. President Dragovich, would you mind an update and then answering any questions that people have?
Sure, Mayor Herzig, thanks very much. And thanks for inviting us and my students and our Vice President, Karen McGrath, to join this evening. Let me give you a brief update. Things can change very quickly. And I think that one of the strengths of our community is we've remained agile and in somewhat of a defensive position initially, and now we're taking a much more offensive strategy. The day after our last control room meeting, we made the decision to switch to 14 days of remote learning for our entire campus. We decided that even though students were welcome to remain on our campus, we would not convene for study, even though we had assured that we had appropriate social distance in our classrooms. And we weren't required to do this by any authority or by any particular guideline. We really did it as a precaution because there was no way for us to really understand how much contact had already occurred between our students at Hartwick and students on the SUNY campus, and what the actual consequence of that contact might be. So we thought that that was prudent at the time. So we did switch after a day and a half of in-person instruction. We switched immediately to remote only. Then over this last weekend, after receiving advice from Heidi Bond at the Department of Health, and I know at the last meeting we thanked Heidi, and I do it again, she's been a great partner for us. But upon her advice, we made the decision to place all the residents in one residence hall on a 2-week precautionary quarantine. because of a small cluster of exposures in that residence hall. So this was not a mandated quarantine. It's precautionary on our part, just as going to remote instruction for 2 weeks was precautionary on our part. We also made the decision to transition over this last weekend to take out meals only. We had observed that some of our students were moving carefully placed and distanced dining furniture so that they could be with one another. And while I really understand and appreciate their desire to do that, we couldn't figure out an effective way to make sure that people kept the distance that we felt was necessary. So we did move over the weekend to take out meals only, again, as a precaution. We think that that was an important precautionary step to make. And all of these precautionary steps that we take, I know that some folks really can understand and appreciate how important they might be, and others, you know, it's annoying and they're frustrated by some of this decision making. But we feel that at this moment, it's still really important for us to observe very carefully what's happening, not only in our own campus, but around us. And so these are decisions that we've made. We also have placed 5 students over the weekend on administrative leave. That makes a total of 8 on administrative leave. And this particular type of administrative leave requires that they not only not be on our campus, but they also are not allowed to take courses this fall. And we have the ability to do that. So in these particular cases, the most recent ones, they violated our rules about no guest access to their residence halls. So that was hard to say, you know what the rules are. You violated our rules. You know you can't have guests in your residence hall. You have to be gone, and you are not allowed to continue in your classes this fall. So we're taking a very aggressive, I guess, certainly assertive position on enforcing our rules. You know, we've chosen to do this because these students broke the COVID rules that we have in place, and we have them in place to protect our whole community. We did issue at least 1 trespass ticket. We may have 2 at this point. I'm not certain whether the second was issued. We did that because it's clear that our campus is closed, and in at least 1 case, we were able to establish that the individual who came onto our campus was not eligible to be there. In addition, in a video I said to our community yesterday, I asked those few Hartwick students who may still not be comfortable with our COVID rules and or are unwilling to follow the terms of the social compact that they signed, I asked them to volunteer to leave our campus. And we provided them with the means to do so. Our safety officers are now asking to see student IDs on our campus because we have over the weekend, as I said, we found individuals who did not belong on our campus, despite the fact that we still have sentries at our entrances. Folks have tried to defy those boundaries. And so we are asking our students to see their IDs, and to the 3 students who I know are joining us this evening, I'm sorry about that. It's not a very Hartwick thing to do. This is not something in my 12 years as president we have ever done. Required people to surrender their IDs as our campus safety officers are moving around the campus, but we find that unfortunately it's necessary for now. At this time, we have had a total of 11 total positive cases. This is less than 1% of our campus population. If you define it by the way the governor has defined these, either 5% or 100 cases in his most recent guidance. So this is less than 1%. And we can see that much of what we're doing is working. We're still doing the SARS-CoV-2 testing. And now we're on a cycle where every employee and every student will have that test every other week. We've done approximately 1,700 tests on our campus to date. So that testing I'm describing is testing that's happening on our campus and will continue to. We have 169 students in quarantine. Most of them, 138, are on campus with 31 off-campus quarantine. And most of those students, to my knowledge, are actually in their homes with their families. I will say that that seems like a large number of individuals on quarantine. Many of those students are associated with this precautionary quarantine we made of an entire residence hall. We're continuing to enforce our requirement for face coverings. The requirement is that face coverings are worn at all times, even when we're out on campus, as long as you're not in a private space. I have to say that that's been a challenge for our students because it's a more strident requirement than is currently imposed by New York State. As you know, the current rule within the state is you only need to wear your face covering outside if you can't assure 6 foot safe distance, but on our campus, everybody has to wear them all the time. So I think that that has been a challenge, though. I've seen, people really come to understand how important it is. We have enforced our requirement that students are permitted to enter only their own residence hall, but not the halls of others. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, they're not allowed to have guests. We've enforced the requirement to keep a 6 foot safe social distance. Some of our students are rotating out of quarantine now, even while others begin quarantine. And so those individuals who came to our campus, and I reported on them last week, who came because they need to go into quarantine right away because they were from hot states, even though they had to bring evidence of a negative test, we still made them quarantine. And so now we've gotten to that 2-week mark, and some of those individuals will start to rotate and have started to rotate out of quarantine. The truth is, everything we've done, we see how important it is. It is difficult. It continues to be difficult to fully manage at a 100% level because our success really depends on the good judgment of every individual in our community. I think we've demonstrated that we're willing to take swift and complete action on individuals who do not want to comply with the rules so that others may. And I've really appreciated the positive feedback that a number of members of the community have made an effort to reach out to me and convey that positive feedback. I appreciate it. I've passed that feedback on to our community. I know that when you're expressing your appreciation to me, you're expressing it to everyone, and I'm grateful. So if you're listening tonight, I am grateful. Our community needs your support, and we care deeply about what's happening here. We will make the decision by the end of this week about whether we'll remain in remote instruction past September 15th, which was the 2-week precautionary period we put into place, or whether we'll extend that. I'm hoping that we can return, but every day is an important day to see what more we learn. And I've heard President Morris and I've heard Heidi Bond mention learning. That's clearly true. Everybody is learning from this experience. I can see people daily from my senior leadership team and all across our campus, all of our students, we're all learning about how best to manage this. And I join Dr. Morris in being grateful to our community for having done a good job. And we're going to continue to act in a very purposeful way to do the best we can to protect the community. So I think I'll stop there. If someone has a question, of course, I'm happy to answer it.
Thank you, Margaret. Any questions for President Dragovich? Julian?
Hello there, President Dragovich. First of all, I just want to say thank you for all the work you're doing in the whole town and city of Oneonta. It's been incredible. I just wanted to speak. I am a resident of Smith Hall right now under the precautionary quarantine effect. So I know there's been a lot of people that have been trying to get a better definition between precautionary and regular quarantine, and we got an information sheet about that. A lot of people have been talking about how our testing going to work. Is it a possibility that we're able to get testing in here and we're negative, that we could possibly move out, or will we still have to be under the quarantine effect?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Julian. I appreciate you being here tonight. So we decided to do quarantine of the entire hall because the Department of Health helped us to determine that there was a cluster of cases, associated cases, people with potential contacts in Smith Hall. So honestly, I don't know, Julian, if we've come to a final answer yet about continued testing for people in quarantine. I've got Vice President McGrath here, who I know has been working with our health center director, and of course we have Heidi Bond. So Karen or Heidi, do you have a final answer on the issue of continued testing for students who are in quarantine, given that this is a precautionary quarantine?
I know I spoke to Amy Gardner just before. She is our director of Parella Health, and she's going to be working with our testing coordinator to determine if we should do testing of all residents of Smith Hall at this time. Then we would coordinate with the Department of Health to see if everyone tested negative, could it mean a reduction of the precautionary timeframe? But my understanding from Heidi Bond, and Heidi, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you were still, even with negative tests, recommending a 14-day precautionary quarantine.
Correct. Yeah, because we don't know what the spread is in the dorm. You know, we don't know what the connection of the 4 students who tested positive, and we saw, you know, on the Oneonta campus, a very widespread in the dorm setting, in that congregate living setting. So what we want to do is protect you all the students in that dorm from becoming either sick or asymptomatic and spreading it to others around the campus or in the dorm. So, right, testing won't get you out of quarantine, but you know, possibly we can discuss lessening that, as it, you know, it wasn't a directive, it was a recommendation. So we can look at that as time goes forward.
Great, thank you very much, Heidi, and Vice President McGrath and President Georgovich.
Is there any other questions for President Dragovich? Okay. Thank you. Thank you to everybody. Before we close, I wanted to just open it up to a little bit of discussion. As I said before, I am really thankful that despite the last 2 weeks, we've all been through something awful. We seem to have acted together in a way that was swift to prevent this from really spreading out of control through the community. And I want to thank everybody, you know, because everybody played a role in that. Even if you did nothing more than wear a mask when you were outside, you helped. So that's really a big thank you to everyone for the fact that we are where we are today, which could have been so much worse. You know, as we go forward, we're clearly not out of the woods, and we have some real challenges ahead of us. And, you know, as we go forward, it's going to be we either all win or we all lose. We're all in this together. There's not going to be some winners and some losers. And, you know, I think about what can we do to make sure that we all come out winners as we go forward. And the 2 things, you know, that primarily come to my mind are, one is enforcement. We've spoken about enforcement. It seems like we're all on the same page now about enforcement. But, you know, I hate enforcement to be the primary tool that we use. You know, we should be able to see this as a teachable moment for all of us, young and old, an opportunity to initiate discussions about sense of community, about shared sacrifice, about putting personal desires and personal benefits second to what is good for the broader community. And the more we can encourage that type of discussion and that kind of message and that type of awareness, the better off we will be. And I don't have the answers to how best to do that, but I'm sure between everybody here, there are some good ways of doing that, some good ideas. So I encourage that type of thinking on everybody's part. And how can we best use this as a moment to get out the message of what is community, what is shared sacrifice, what is putting community before personal interests, because that's really the only thing that will make us successful as we go forward. But I would like to take a minute to hear first from the students of what ideas do you have as the best things we can do going forward to make sure that we continue to progress, stop the spread, and come out of this all healthy. So I think the students' thoughts on that are valuable. Any have some care to offer something? Gabby?
We've gotten much better with this from the beginning, but continue to keep open lines of communication.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Any of the students? Rachel?
Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel. I'm from Hartwick. One of the things I've been very impressed with the Hartwick community is the ability the students have had to hold each other accountable. So I have been in numerous common areas on campus and seen students that have, whether they've been improperly wearing their face masks or not having them on for a sufficient amount of time, I have seen many students politely hold their peers accountable. And I think it's very important that we all acknowledge that, as Mayor Herzig said, we are all in this together, and that our singular actions affect Oneonta, which all of us call home, whether it's year round or whether it's while we're here as students, and that we are all in this together.
Thank you, Rachel. Any of the other students have anything to add? Any ideas? Emma?
I think a big part of this is encouraging a culture on the college campus. I know that a vast majority of students are at college for the primary objective of education. But that being said, as we've seen, there are students whose primary objective is not education. So as much as possible, continuing to encourage that culture and environment where we are on campus and in this community to learn and to be a part of the community in a productive way. Another option or another piece, I've heard suggestions of a sort of community group that can be present in the city, whose role is not so much enforcement, but encouragement of being safe and supporting each other. So maybe if folks are out not wearing masks, being able to offer masks to them, or you know, generally if folks seem like they're not making the best decisions, just engaging in a conversation and making sure that everybody, be it part of the student population or anybody else, you know, is aware that we all have to coexist here and everybody's decisions affect each other. So.
Thank you very much, Emma. Anybody else? Any of the other students? Okay. If not, anybody have any final comments that they want to make or thoughts, ideas? Scott?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, back to your original question. I think one word, and that's respect. I think everybody just has to respect each other and respect what's going on and the dangers of it. And if we all just respect what's put in place, I think we'll come through on the other side of this.
Thank you, Scott. Anybody else? Danny?
I think that we need, from the county perspective, we are going through our budget cycle. And so as we move into the winter and through the subsequent months, I think it's really imperative that we all communicate together so that the county can adequately fund Heidi to make sure that we can carry out public health obligations and make sure that, you know, the city and the college's needs are met from the county level.
Thank you, Danny. Dave? Risberger?
Yeah, thank you. At the risk of repeating what others have said, I think keeping an open line of communication is imperative at this point. And I think we all need to remember that we don't have three separate communities here. We are all part of one community. And I think it's really going to show this semester, since especially with SUNY going online, and there eventually won't be any students on campus. They're going to be downtown. It's going to show even more that we are one community. And I just think it's very important that we keep those lines of communication open. No secrets. If anything happens, I think we need to let each other know what's happening, because I've always thought the more heads in the game, the better solution you're going to have.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to add one comment, and it just, I think for everyone's consideration, I appreciated Danny's point about the budget. You know, all of our testing expenses are being paid for by the college. And I don't know whether the state of New York will get to the place where they would be willing to extend, or even if it's possible for them to extend any assistance to us to help with those expenses. But if that were possible, it would be an extraordinary help to the college right now. The testing program that we have in place is very expensive and will continue to be for the rest of the semester. And we don't have any state assistance with those expenses. So something, as you're just thinking about it, talking with other people in government in the state, if there's any possibility of getting any assistance with those expenses, we would be grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will bring it up in committee and see if we can get something put together.
Thanks, Danny.
You're welcome.
Okay. If there's nothing else, yeah, several people spoke about being one community, and I think one of the things that pains me most about where we are at right now is, fear brings out the worst in people, and it divides people. And we've all seen that there's some backlash, I'm going to say, from our year-round residents against students, and they're afraid of them, they're concerned, and that's not what we want to see. We want to see, that's the worst thing that can happen to us. And I don't have all the answers how to overcome that, but I think a lot of the things that were said today are part of the solution. I think listening to the young people who have spoken today, I hope many people have heard your voices, because I think that helps. But we all have a lot of mending to do, because fear does tend to separate people, and that's not where we want to be as a community. So we have a lot of work ahead of us to overcome that, as well as overcoming this damn virus. So if there's nobody else, again, I want to thank you all for taking the time, for being here. I think the dialogue is helpful and important, and I think many people in the community watch us, and it's informative to them, and the dialogue helps them to see where we're going and where we are. So thank you to all, and I hope you had an enjoyable 3-day weekend for the most part.